B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins News and Comment. It's Wednesday, November 1st, 2017. Reacting, overreacting, unhinged. That's how I would describe Trump following the episode in New York City yesterday where a green card holding Uzbeki immigrant is accused of taking a Home Depot rental truck and plowing into people on a bike path in lower Manhattan. Now, it's an ugly event, tragic at the loss of life. 8 people killed and a number of others were injured. And it injects fear into people going about their daily business. And instead of responding in a way of trying to address those fears, calm those fears, Donald Trump stoked them. Our dear tweeter grabbed his phone and started to make threats, started to demonize the suspect in a way that could compromise his eventual prosecution. And he started blaming people and pointing a finger at a 20-year-old immigration law and pretending that his vetting of individuals from countries that don't include Uzbekistan could somehow prevent this from happening in the future. It is so irrational, so unpresidential. And in a moment, we will compare it to his subdued response to the Las Vegas massacre that killed almost 8 times as many people. Now, only a few of them may have been New Yorkers. Trump's very, very loyal to his town. But perhaps the difference in the complexion and the racial composition of the suspected shooters or perpetrators may be at play here. So the suspect is 29-year-old Sayfullo Saipov. He landed in Ohio up near Akron, moved to Florida, was not doing well there, and then moved to Paterson, New Jersey, where his wife has family. He was driving for Uber and variously described as prone to temper tantrums, a guy who observed certain customs of Islam but was not deeply religious. He left a note in the truck that he wants the Islamic State to endure forever. He shouted, Allahu Akbar, I'm not very good at that phrase, as he jumped out of the truck, clutching a pellet gun and a paintball gun. Now, those are indications of a desire for suicide by cop. And I was actually mildly pleased to see that the cops didn't shoot him dead. They wounded him. He's in a hospital. He's talking to authorities. His wife is described as cooperating. And despite all that, Trump is threatening to declare him an enemy combatant and send him to Guantanamo. He's being egged on by John McCain, who we thought was at odds with Trump, and Lindsey Graham, who's lately been kissing Trump's ass in a big way. And, of course, the mere mention of Uzbekistan summons for me the failed candidacy of Herman Cain in 2012, the guy with the 999 plan, who famously said, don't quiz me about who's running Uzbekistan, because he didn't know. So this is obviously a troubling incident, but it is compounded by the news that comes with the identification of the suspect, that he was already on the radar of the FBI. How many times have we seen this before? Now, it's still sketchy exactly what the radar signals were, whether he had been assigned a paid FBI informant. The New York Times said he drew concerns at a mosque in Tampa he attended before moving to New Jersey. We don't know what kind of concerns those were and whether they rose to the level of FBI surveillance. He moved to New Jersey in March of this year, and he is reported to have routinely showed up late for Friday prayers when he attended a mosque near Akron. So these are just initial sketches. We'll certainly learn more about him. But I, of course, key in on the FBI radar reports because we have seen people who were framed, who were prodded by the efforts of a paid FBI informant, a provocateur. And I remain open to learning more about this man and the actions that he took yesterday. But Trump's reactions are just so out of control, unhinged. It amounts to grandstanding, and because of the racial difference here, the comparison with Las Vegas, I think, is significant. So here we have a Muslim immigrant accused of this crime, and Trump already says that, he's an animal. He wants harsher and swifter punishment for these animals, he said. Now, I want to be fair about this. He did not initiate the suggestion of sending the suspect to Guantanamo. That came from Lindsey Graham. That's the first person I see it attributed to. And so in a cabinet meeting with a few reporters allowed in at the beginning this morning, Trump was asked if he would send the suspect to Gitmo. He said, I would certainly consider that. Send him to Gitmo. I would certainly consider that, yes. So while he probably could have gotten the idea on his own, it pains me to see that it's reporters who kind of suggest this as if that is the appropriate response here. Now, while this man is not, his name is Saipov, while he is not an American citizen, he is a green card-holding U.S. resident. He did not come here to commit this crime. He has been living here for 7 years, reportedly radicalized since he arrived. And the argument is that he carried this out in a way that is almost down to the letter, the instructions that have been offered by the Islamic State and their publication called Aspire. But Trump went even deeper. He claims that this 20-year-old law which developed the diversity visa lottery program, it's 50,000 visas a year. No one country gets more than 7% of them. And because it's a lottery, it's seen as a way of preventing somebody whose intent is to immigrate to the United States to do us harm. Well, they couldn't get through a lottery program, or if they did, it would require luck greater than, I'm told, than the odds of getting into Harvard. But Trump, who loves to talk tough on his reality TV show that now unfortunately is broadcast almost daily, we need quick justice, we need strong justice, much quicker, much stronger than we have right now, because what we have right now is a joke and it's a laughingstock. Those are authoritarian comments. Those are saying, who cares about the Constitution, the rule of law, and due process? Let's just take him out to Times Square and shoot him. And then he attacked Chuck Schumer for co-authoring this law, as I said, that was more than 20 years ago. It was it approved on a bipartisan basis. It was signed by Poppy Bush, George H.W. Bush at the time. And so that's truly a red herring and a highly political accusation to be tossing out before the bodies are even buried. Governor Cuomo of New York got it right. He said that Trump's tweets are not helpful, not even accurate, tended to point fingers and politicize the situation. And you play into the hands of the terrorists to the extent that you disrupt and divide and frighten people in this society. And the tone now should be the exact opposite by all officials on all levels. This is about unification, about solidarity. And even Jeff Flake, the Republican who has publicly broken from Trump, came to Schumer's defense Actually, the Gang of Eight, including Schumer, did away with the diversity visa program as part of broader reforms. I know. I was there. That is the Senate bill that was passed and never taken up in any form, even in a partial way, by the House of Representatives. It's what led Obama to implement DACA through executive order. And so Trump is jumping on the term diversity immigrants. These are hot-button words for people who don't understand them. Yes, he is appealing to the ignorance of his Twitter base. And he even tweeted out a comment that's hard to explain. Senator Chuck Schumer helping to import Europe's problems. Quoting Colonel Tony Schaefer, who was a whistleblower about the Iraq War 10 years ago. We will stop this craziness, he promises. Well, Uzbekistan is not in Europe. And maybe this is an inartful comparison to the trucks that were used as weapons in Nice and in London and in Barcelona. Vehicles, it wasn't all trucks. But to see Lindsey Graham try to cuddle up to Trump by promoting this bullshit that he should be treated as an enemy combatant and that Guantanamo is the place to send him, that's really ugly and truly un-American. And in The Guardian today, there's a good piece written by David Smith in their Washington bureau. Trump's politicized reaction to New York attack is a far cry from Las Vegas shooting. One prompted a somber tone, quotation from Scripture, prayer for unity. The other brought a barrage of tweets peppered with capital letters, exclamation marks, bent on divisiveness and blame. Trump had sharply contrasting responses to the mass shooting in Las Vegas and the terrorist attack in New York that bookended the month of October here in America. The morning after, allegedly, Stephen Paddock fired hundreds of rifle rounds at the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas, killing 58. Trump was at his most presidential. Quote, in moments of tragedy and horror, America comes together as one, and it always has. But when 8 people were killed, 11 wounded by the Uzbeki immigrant, Trump rattled off several tweets in the immediate aftermath and today went highly personal and political, raising the prospect of sending the suspect to Guantanamo Bay and taking aim at the Democratic Senate leader, Chuck Schumer. And I think that's a very apt comparison. I don't think I need to say too much more about that. And a little more on this diversity lottery, as I mentioned. 50,000 green cards are made available each year, and that'll probably change under Trump. Last year, 9.3 million people entered that lottery, and there were only 50,000 green cards issued. You do the math. You tell me if somebody with terrorist intentions would submit to a process like that, hope to get through it, and someday become that sleeper cell that was awakened. So this is just another racist, nationalist, nativist, pick your ist, response by Trump. It won't be the last. And it leaves us all deeply embarrassed and a nation that is further divided. And Trump, again off base, says, well, I've just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program. Being politically correct is fine, but not for this. I mean, he's essentially just arguing that we should close our borders completely, maybe even to tourists and business travelers. Now, I've used this phrase before. He wants to lift the drawbridge at Fortress America and imagine that isolationism can somehow protect us. But individuals like Saipov really disprove that. And we never take a moment to reflect on what might cause Saipov to become so-called radicalized. Is it our continuing occupation of Afghanistan, Iraq, our involvement in Yemen, our involvement in the regime change war in Syria? our support for the new military dictator in Egypt. Now, none of these relate directly to Uzbekistan, but they relate to the complaints that Muslims around the world feel about our country. But we never acknowledge that, not even for a moment, not even in self-reflection, not even in a moment of doubt. Because we're the good guys here. America never does anything wrong. We don't deserve any kind of blowback or retribution or reaction, even from people who are off base. No. Interesting piece in the New York Times today. It's described as opinion. But three writers, Taylor Adams, Jesse Ma, and Stuart A. Thompson, they each tracked the coverage on Monday morning when the indictments of Manafort, and I was calling him Davis. Rick Gates is Manafort's partner. And I want to thank Joe, I think his name is Davis, who corrected me. The reason I made that mistake the other day is that Manafort's company is called Davis Manafort, but his partner is Rick Gates. So I sit here corrected, and thank you, Joe, for pointing that out. Anyway, these reporters each watched MSNBC, CNN, and Fox as the Manafort indictments were being publicized. And they went minute by minute, showing what topics were being covered on the president's favorite morning show, Fox and Friends, while the other networks went wall-to-wall with no commercials, covering the breaking news of the Manafort and Gates indictments and the plea deal by Papadopoulos. And when you look at the timeline here for the 8 a.m. Eastern hour, MSNBC and CNN are wall-to-wall on Manafort. But over on Fox, they're talking about the Clinton investigation, who paid for the dossier. It was Fusion GPS via the Clinton campaign. They had a soft feature about how at the World Series, Bush 41 and Bush 43 threw out first pitches. Then they talk about how Organizing for America, the Obama arm, gave almost $1 million to Fusion GPS. Then there was a segment about American patriotism, about ISIS and Prince George. I don't even know much about that story. Then there was the widely publicized Google emoji about a cheeseburger, and they put the cheese on the bottom of the burger between the cheese and the bun, and this is some sort of a crisis. Then Newsweek under fire for an op-ed, not sure what that's about. So you can see that Trump gets a special news feed from Fox and Friends designed to pander to him on a daily basis, and it sets off a lot of these bizarre tweets where we scratch our heads and say, what prompted that? Where'd that come from? Well, the answer is typically Fox and Friends. Every day I spend a moment thanking my friends, many people I've never met or had other contact with, who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like Susan Lundgren, George Reeves, and David Michaelitz and Kyle McClary just renewed their annual subscriptions a few days ago. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. And let's mention Andrew Harnack, because he's right on the list here, too, as a monthly contributor. You can do it, too, and please do. Visit peterbcollins.com, find the menu button, click it, find Become a Subscriber. It takes you to the sign-up page, and there you can make easy choices about what fits your budget. So it's day 2 of the grilling of Facebook, Google, and Twitter on Capitol Hill. And we're not seeing Larry and Sergey from Google. We're not seeing the CEO, I think his name is Jack Halsey, if I have him right, at Twitter. And we're not seeing Mark Zuckerberg. Lower-ranking executives, and in the case of Facebook, their lawyer, their senior counsel, are taking the beating from both sides of the partisan aisle. And the partisanship is clear to see, because Republicans are saying, hey, this is all interesting, but it wasn't just Facebook and, electronic media, social media, that caused Trump to win. And as you know, I agree with that. Marco Rubio emphasized the real intent of Russian propaganda is to generally spread misinformation and chaos. These operations, they're not limited to 2016, not limited to the presidential race. They continue to this day. They are much more widespread than one election. But the Democrats are on a different script. Ron Wyden of Oregon saying the Russians created Facebook pages, posted YouTube videos, all trying to appeal to specific audiences. And that may be true. But their impact is highly exaggerated, and it's the Democrats who are doing the exaggeration. And I agree that we need some new laws to regulate social media, particularly as related to political advertising and the free media that people get from an organic post that I put up or you put up and that gets shared by people that you know. And so I do take it seriously, but these issues are being used opportunistically by members of each of the major parties. And as we look at the situation and the information that's coming out, we see that it does create a great punching bag. And Al Franken was up there punching. The former Air America radio host, the author of Lying Liars and Rush Limbaugh books, he hammered the lawyer from Facebook, whose name is Colin Stretch. He said, how did Facebook, which prides itself on being able to process billions of data points, instantly transform them into personal connections for its users, somehow not make the connection that electoral ads paid for in rubles were coming from Russia? Those are two data points, American political ads and Russian money, rubles. How could you not connect these two dots? Now, I think that's a fair question. And the House Intelligence Committee has started to post for public consumption some of the Facebook ads and the metadata that went with them. The metadata includes the text of the ad. It includes the payments that were made, the transaction codes. And in one case, this is an ad aimed at supporting the police and demonizing Black Lives Matter activists. And they use a story from Boston to say this is a vivid example of the war with the police. It's not over. It's only coming. The consequences will be destructive if Hillary Clinton, the main hardliner against cops, will become the president of the United States. Among all the candidates, Donald Trump is the one and only who can defend the police from terrorists. Now, listen to that last line. Among all the candidates. This ad was posted on October 14th of 2016. It appeared for only 24 hours. Only 362 impressions were delivered, and 761 people clicked through on it. And yes, it was paid for by somebody who spent 500 rubles. But the ad says that among all the candidates, well, at that point, all the candidates were Hillary, Donald, Jill Stein, if you go third party, and the Libertarian campaign. Then you got to go pretty far down the tree to claim all the candidates. So many of these ads were off base in ways that were telling to any American who is lucid. Here's another one where the headline reads, "We are not against police, we against police brutality." Now, that's pidgin English that could come from anywhere, but this indicates that this ad that was paid for with 54,000 rubles actually appeared about 9 months before it was created. Now, this just could be an error of the coding and the information in this file. But it says the ad was created on May 5th of 2016, and it started running on September 23rd of 2015. So I urge you to be skeptical and cautious as you absorb all this information and recognize that there's a whole lot of bullshit out there, and that this Sturm und Drang and the so-called war on fake news has real casualties, and one of them is a man I deeply admire who's been on this program many times, Chris Hedges, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, former Mideast bureau chief for the New York Times, and he learned that he is being blacklisted by Google. Google News will not serve up links to thousands of articles that Chris Hedges has written over the years. A search before the blackout began produced almost 89,000 entries if you just searched under the words Chris and Hedges. But now, says Chris, it's all gone. And I'm certain it's because I spoke out against the Google censorship. He gave an interview to the World Socialist website, and he said, sometime after I gave that interview, they blacklisted me. If you go into Google News and type my name, there are 6 stories, none of which have anything to do with me. And the World Socialist website's traffic from Google search has dropped by 74%. 13 leading left-wing websites have seen their traffic drop by an average of 55% or more. And Hedges, he's alarmed. He said, speaking as a journalist, it's terrifying. These people who still try and do journalism, they're the ones getting hit, especially those journalists who attempt to grapple with issues of power and the corporate state. This shows not only how bankrupt the state is, but how frightened it is. Well, good news for Americans, and I would credit Obama for the pain and suffering that he endured trying to right the economy that was wrecked by the Republicans before he took office. But, of course, Trump is taking credit for economic growth that hit 3% in the last quarter, despite the hurricanes, the wildfires here in California, and other interruptions to economic growth. And I embrace the good news. I place the credit more with Obama than Trump. But it raises a big question. Why the hell do we need tax cuts? And the Republicans had to delay. They say it'll be tomorrow when they unveil their tax cut plans. Trump insists it's going to be massive. It's going to be great. But nobody really makes the case as to why we need these tax cuts. There are all these fuzzy promises, the fuzzy math of job creation and trickle-down economic benefits, but we all know that's bullshit. And the Republicans have hit some walls trying to deliver on their promises. For example, they want to double the standard deduction, but they also want to eliminate or roll back sharply the deduction that we get for paying state and local taxes, including property taxes, state income taxes, sales taxes. This would be a huge hit to high-tax states like California, New York, New Jersey. But the Republicans are pressing on. We'll see what they come up with when they finally unveil it. The Navy is reporting that the 2 incidents of ship collisions this past summer that killed a total of 17 sailors at sea were caused by humans. Now, I had suspected that there was hacking into the computer navigation systems of these ships that may have led to these unfortunate collisions. But the Navy is acknowledging that this is human error. Regarding the USS Fitzgerald, they determined that it was in a crossing situation with 3 merchant ships, meaning that the people on the watch deck were obliged to take action to avoid them. But in the 30 minutes leading up to the collision, neither the Fitzgerald nor the container ship, a Philippine ship, did so until just a minute prior to the disaster, and they collided nevertheless. And the situation regarding the USS McCain is different, but the captain of that ship was on the deck at the time that confusion developed and they careened into another vessel. I've been trying to get to this story for days now, and I'm probably over time already today, but I'm going to press on because this is important. You know that I am a deep supporter of BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, aimed at the State of Israel for its draconian apartheid policies that affect the Palestinian people. Well, according to Haaretz, a leading Israeli newspaper, the State of Israel has secretly hired a Chicago-based law firm, the juice firm Sidley Austin, to legally harass people who are seen as enemies of the State of Israel because they support BDS. And the Strategic Affairs Ministry of Israel has issued contracts to fight against delegitimization and earmarked major resources for these efforts. And they are bearing fruit. Trump has named to the Education Department, to the post of Civil Rights Director, a man who is a deep opponent of BDS and who even formed his own organization, the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights Under Law. Let me get his title correct. He is the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. That means he'll have some sway over universities that allow Palestinian voices to be heard on campus, that allow proponents of BDS to be heard on a campus. He has spent years campaigning for crackdowns on Palestinian-American student activism and used laws to punish Americans who support BDS. The guy's name is Kenneth Marcus. He has said that he founded the Brandeis Center to fight anti-Semitism on college campuses, but he makes little distinction between anti-Semitism and opposition to the government of the State of Israel. He has called on Virginia to adopt the State Department's widely criticized definition of anti-Semitism, which includes as examples delegitimizing, demonizing Israel, applying double standards to Israel, and focusing on Israel only for peace or human rights investigations. That's verboten. Now, this is a clear violation of our First Amendment rights. A couple of more items, and I'll wrap it up here. As you may know, Donald Trump was accused last fall by 10 different women of groping them on different occasions. And Summer Zervos, a former contestant on The Apprentice, accused Trump of kissing and grabbing her when she went to his bungalow at the Beverly Hills Hotel in 2007 to talk about a possible job at the Trump Organization. So she made the accusation, Trump called it a lie, and Zervos is suing him for defamation. And the bizarre arguments advanced by Mark Kasowitz, the hardball lawyer for Trump. He first says that what Zervos alleges to have occurred never happened. But then he goes on to say that, well, this litigation places a substantial burden on the president. It's now beyond a reasonable debate that Clinton versus Jones, which included claims for defamation, occupied an inordinate amount of Clinton's time, impeded his ability to carry out his duties. So Trump's lawyers want this case dismissed because it would distract him. Now, this is a case where the corporate media is not really very active. But they sure are busy exposing all of Hollywood and corporate media's alleged gropers. And I'm concerned here that this is spinning out of control. We are using mob standards, mob justice, a kind of public shaming standard. And Harvey Weinstein is a pig. I think it's pretty clear from the evidence that we've seen so far that he could be found guilty of sexual assault. But many of these cases that are coming public right now are sexual harassment. And there's a very big difference between harassment and rape. And I want rapists punished. But it's got to be done legally. We've got to follow the law and due process. We can't simply surface an allegation, have 5 other people endorse it, and then say, well, you lose your job. There has to be some system that we use to determine if these allegations are true. So we've got director Brett Ratner accused by 6 women. Dustin Hoffman has been accused by a woman named Anna Graham Hunter, who says that Hoffman sexually harassed her when she was 17. He has apologized. But he did not sexually assault her, and that is different from what Kevin Spacey is accused of, what James Toback is accused of. Jeremy Piven is unequivocally denying an allegation from reality TV star Ariane Bellemare. And I don't know. I mean, Jeremy Piven was on that Entourage show. They were really depicting young Hollywood actors who used women in ugly ways. But was that Jeremy Piven's character, or was he guilty of inappropriate behavior? And because I don't know, I'm not willing to see Jeremy Piven get punished by losing his starring role in the current CBS drama called Wisdom of the Crowd. I haven't seen it. I don't care about the show. But I care about the constitutional rights of people who are accused. And if the accusations can withstand a trial and the individuals are found guilty, they should be appropriately punished. But simply to use mob justice and cause people to lose their jobs and lose their reputations, oh, I'm extremely uncomfortable with that. Thanks for joining me today for my News and Comment podcast. It's always free, and it's available on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.